The Pucks with Haggs podcast is powered by PrizePicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by PrizePicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 69th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. No Gronk jokes, please. I am your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. You can join with a premium membership and get all of my Bruins and NHL writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write for the Boston Sports Journal, have a column there at bostonsportsjournal.com every morning after a game day. I have friends and colleagues with me today. Steve Conroy for the Boston Herald. Steve, thank you very much for joining us. And we also have Mick Colageo here. Mick, please tell everybody where they can find your stuff.
Rink Wrap blog on game nights at home and weekly at bostonhockeynow.com. Sunday column I write to support Murph with that site, and also seasonal issues of the Hockey News. And I come here. They let me in.
There you go. And let's also thank PrizePicks, our sponsor for the show. It's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. I encourage you to download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS for a first-time deposit match of up to $100. That's, once again, download the PrizePicks app and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. And this is a pretty cool daily fantasy site where you actually pick players and then pick more or less for the stats. So you can actually go and there will be a number, and you pick more or less for, like, David Pastrnak shots on net, Charlie McAvoy blocked shots, all that stuff in a game. It's a really interesting, different sort of format, the daily fantasy sports. It's pretty cool. More on that later, though. Let's get to the heart of the matter here. The Bruins win last night, Steve. And it was funny. I forget who it was, but somebody asked Jim Montgomery today if that's just what the doctor ordered. And he's like, I don't know if that's what the doctor ordered, but we'll take the 2 points. Like, it's fits and starts right now for this Bruins team. Like, even when they win, it's not like a clean go up 3-0 in the first period, coast to a 5-1 win kind of a thing. It's, go up 3-0, have a crap second period where you allow the other team into the game, and then it's white knuckle in the third period. But they made the plays down the stretch. The special teams units both came up big at the end. And they did enough to get the win, stay out of overtime, execute in the third period. I mean, I think it was a pretty good first step from the losing and going to overtime and blowing the third period leads, but they're still obviously working towards, being playoff ready, which they're not right now.
Yeah, and they really didn't close it out. They had to lean on Swayman to make some huge saves. They failed to get the puck out several times in that final minute. There's a lot to be concerned about there.
I will say the penalty kill was good, though, before that.
That was good. That was good.
Excellent.
That was good. They're without a top four defenseman right now. We knew going in that they were a little thin to begin with. So when Lindholm comes back, I think it should help, although these issues had cropped up before he got hurt. Yep. But we'll see. I mean, they're a fragile team right now. We'll see if finally kneeling one down, gets them over the hump in that regard. But, they're going to be playing a desperate team tomorrow night on the island, coming off a couple of big wins on the road. And then they've got Toronto, who can put up a lot of goals. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, they've got Toronto twice in next week, and Toronto could very easily close that gap that they have with the Bruins right now.
Yeah, they could if they keep playing well, no question. If the Bruins keep treading water as they've done. To Steve, what Steve's alluding to there a little bit. I believe last night was the 10th game in a row they've allowed 3 goals or more, going back to like early February, back to the shutout they had of Vancouver, the second game out of the All-Star break.
Counting overtime and shootout.
Yes, correct.
So not quite 3 every game, but
correct.
For all intents and purposes.
Yes. For our purposes, it's like a sign that the defense is not getting it done right now, and they're allowing more goals, and it's a little bit more wide open. They're certainly making more mistakes. defensively. And to be honest with you, I don't really blame and fault the goaltending for a lot of what's going on. I think they're just allowing a lot of really good chances and having leaky defense at times. There's maybe a soft goal here or there, but that has not been the case most of the time. Instead, it's, to Steve's point, Jeremy Swayman, making big saves at the end. And I've said this a few times. Almost lately, you felt like he's playing that Grant Fuhr goalie game where the numbers don't look good and he gives up a bunch of goals, but he actually still plays well and either gets them the point or they win the game. Steve, your takes from last night, what you liked. I'm sorry, Mick, your takes from last night, what you liked, what you didn't like, and if you think this is a big step in the right direction for them.
Yeah, it reminds me of Cujo, by the way. The way the Leafs used to play in front of him 20 years ago. They really played on the front foot because they had him back there. Yeah. That might be what the Bruins need to be. I mean, Swayman, I thought his best save of the night was in the second period when Lowry deked like three guys and then went to pass an outlet to Carlo, but he peeled away at the exact wrong moment because they don't play together much. Right. So it winds up being a turnover, and Swayman had to make an unbelievable save to stop a goal in the second period there. But yeah, I got no issues with the goalies. My big problem is when opponents start making their push and lock down those half wall plays, the outlets, trying to get out of the zone, the Bruins just have a devil of a time trying to do anything but punt. And even when they do, the regroups and re-entries are way too fast. Last night I was better than the last time I saw them, but that's an issue going forward, that they still 5-on-5 when the other team wants to make a push. If it's a good team, they're making those pushes and they're very formidable doing so. Way too much to make me think based on how much do the Bruins wear them down. Well, there's an adrenaline-fueled, frenzied start to the game sometimes for the Bruins, where if they start well, they start really, really well. And last night was one of those. And so much coming from the bottom six there. It was great to see, not poo-pooing it by any stretch, but it's also one of those things that is short-lived and not sustainable. So it gets you ahead, but then the hard hockey that gets played for the rest of the game, that's where they're not measuring up, and that's where the concerns are. So, yeah, great start, great. I don't think the team's changing or sitting back or anything. I just don't think they cope well with the other team's pushes. I think that's what I'm looking at. And we're going to get a look at Toronto next couple of weeks with Leah Bushkin is going to be bolstering their right side. So we'll get a look at them with the defensive reinforcements and maybe get a little playoff preview there.
Yeah, pushes and also just hard forecheck, aggressive forecheck. They continue to have trouble just breaking the puck out when anybody starts to apply pressure on them. And this is another one of those issues that goes back to last year against Florida in the playoffs that they continue to struggle with. There are certain things that they've continued to have problems with at certain times this year that remind me of some of the issues that we saw during the playoffs last year against Florida. And I even to a degree thought, that play with Ullmark where he tried to throw it up the middle and threw it right into traffic into a body and it turns into an easy goal. That was, that reminded me a little bit of some of the stuff that he was doing against Florida in the playoffs last year as well. When he was not keeping it simple and trying to do a little bit too much.
Larry the cheese.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting to watch as well. But I think your point about having difficulty breaking the puck out is totally apt. And I think it's been a big problem for them at times this year, especially with teams that are fast, physical, and hard on the forecheck. Latest news for the Bruins, Mark McLaughlin called up Bill Ricka's finest on emergency recall after practice, after media availability. Clearly on emergency recall, so there's going to be some kind of injury or illness there. His first call-up of the year. Any insight into this, Steve? And obviously, I think we all hope he gets in the lineup. But he hasn't had too many chances the last couple of years. He's a hardworking kid that definitely deserves a look.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's banged up, but there must this time of year there's probably 4 or 5 question marks.
Yep.
So hasn't had a great year down in Providence. Had an okay camp. I don't think he's ever really bounced back from having that really good camp last year and then getting sent down.
Yeah.
But like you said, he's a really good kid. Everybody seems to like him. Hardworking kid. But I don't think he's a difference maker for this team. As Brazeau was when he got called up. So we'll see. We'll see who the question mark is tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, we'd all assume it's a bottom six guy. I think that's why you would call up McLaughlin.
Yeah.
We'll see who it ends up being that is a question mark. But in that answers that, like, there were some people immediately, they were like, how come it wasn't on Twitter saying, how come it wasn't Fabian Lysell, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, they're two completely different players. McLaughlin can play center and wing. He's more of a bottom six kind of a guy. Kill penalties, play an energy line role, stuff like that. Things you're not going to put Fabian Lysell into as far as situationally. But
they're also on a 2-game road trip, and they were down to 12 forwards.
Yep.
So he could be just insurance. We'll see.
Yep. The Pucks with Haggs podcast is powered by PrizePicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. Football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up, whether it's the tournament season or the fight for playoff home court. It goes beyond the hockey that we're talking about. We're talking about basketball as well. There's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into some serious cash. And what better way to also pick players and go more or less than with some of the celebrity PrizePicks favorite players like Meek Mill and Sugar Sean O'Malley. You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. The app is easy to download, so download that PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's downloading the PrizePick app and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Morgan Geeky hat trick, Mick, last night. He now has career highs in points and goals this season, 13 goals, 30 points. He's on pace for about 17, 18 goals and 40-something points. Yet again, he has turned into, and he has been, one of those very good, modest signing kind of players that the Bruins seem to excel in, where they take a guy that they see playing certain roles on certain teams and project that he can be even a little bit better and the ceiling's a little higher. And maybe if we give him, some third line minutes, play him with some different players, move him around a little bit, play him at center, all that stuff, you can get a little more out of him. He becomes a really good bottom six kind of forward. And for me, watching him play, some of the goals he scored last night, watching him all season, especially once he really got his footing and his confidence here, I think he's the kind of player that's going to help you in the playoffs. 6'3", over 200 pounds, big, strong guy, second, third effort kind of guy, can do a lot of different things for you, is going to use size and strength around the net. Had a great tip where he fought his way to the front of the net on Pasternak. Even if he said it was kind of by accident and he wasn't where he wanted to be, still he was there. And that's where you need somebody in the postseason, is in that exact spot making plays. So I continue to be impressed by Morgan Geeky, and it's a hat tip to the NHL scouts that saw him somewhere else and said he'd be a good fit with the Bruins.
Absolutely. They knew that there was a player there that they didn't feel like Seattle had explored his upside, and they wanted to be the team that did it. And what a perfect season for them to acquire him and do so. I think it's good. I think it's been a fantastic acquisition. It ranks among the really good ones of the Don Sweeney tenure, which is probably led by Charlie Coyle. But this one's been really excellent. I love how Geeky brings an element of clumsiness to his game.
Oh yeah.
But it's
not dazzlingly skillful. He doesn't look like a ballet dancer out there.
Right, but he's got sneaky great hand eye. So it's like there's a lot of that. Just he's such a good overall athlete that while he's not a great skater, he gets there, and the puck tends to follow him through traffic, which is great. I love players like that. They can't all be like that, but it's great to have one on your team. That's a tremendous acquisition. And as you know, of course, they love those guys who can play center and wing, and he did that in the right shot in a perfect season to get another guy like that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I keep forgetting that he's just 25 years old and he's still an RFA, albeit with arbitration rights, but he's still an RFA after this contract for $2 million a year is up following next season. So I think he's starting to carve himself into a a pretty good role with this team, where if he keeps improving even a little bit more, he could become part of this core group with the team, Steve.
Yeah. I think a lot of teams raised their eyebrows when he didn't get qualified last summer. That news broke on June 30th, I think, and next day Bruins signed him. Yep. He brings a lot of good things. He's he's got an old school Manitoba, quality to him. Yep. What his jaw was out to here. He says, "Oh, it's a long way from the heart." Yeah, I love all that stuff. One thing, if he's going to be on the first power play unit, he's got to work on faceoffs. He was 6 for 19 last night. That power play, that late power play. He lost the first draw and it goes down the end of the ice, and you lose 20 seconds there. But everything else about his game, I like a lot.
And that first period was funny because he had 2 goals and he was one out of 6 in the draw.
Yeah. And the thing that impressed me on his first goal was that feathery lead pass by Trent Frederick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was just great instinctual play by both of those players, where Geeky knew he got a piece of it by the blue line and that it was disrupting behind him, and it was most likely going to go to somebody, on his team. So he just takes off, and then Freddie read it perfectly too. That was great teamwork and play by both those guys.
Yeah.
I talked to Frederick about it today, and in his usual style, he said, "Oh yeah, I didn't want to do this, I didn't want to do that. It was mostly luck."
His honesty might be over detrimental. I'd like to see. Because we know it's there. It's in him.
Yeah.
That's essentially. I was talking to Loco about the pass he made to Boquist yesterday for that goal that he scored, and he essentially said the same thing. He's like, I knew Brazeau was somewhere near the post, and I knew Jesper was somewhere behind him, a high slot, or coming in towards the net. So I just threw it right down the middle and figured either one of the two was going to get it and make a play with it. So it was, not exactly by design by him either, but he was just throwing it to an area where he knew something good was going to happen. That's just, good hockey IQ. And
the speed he plays, I think you got to think the game the way he thinks it.
Absolutely. I really liked, obviously, the Mason low-rise goal, the game winner, too. I continue to see when he's on the power play, he makes things happen when he gets out there on a power play unit. He looks really comfortable working the power play. I think having he and Shattenkirk both out there on that unit as the 2 points is extremely good and dangerous, and they're both power play kind of players. And I just wonder if he continues to make plays and he continues to look good, because I think obviously his skill set is geared towards being a power play unit kind of guy. Does it come to a time where he becomes so good on the power play, if he's in the lineup, that you have to look at him on the first unit because of what he has, because of all the skills that he has, because he's going to be able to create plays. He's not afraid to take shots. He's definitely a guy that will shoot the puck when he's given the space to do it. He's really good and smooth moving it back and forth. Do you leave him on the second unit where he can be, and maybe things will go through him and he can kind of be that old school power play quarterback from the defenseman position? Or do you put him on the first unit with all your best offensive players and, try to recreate maybe what you had with Torrey Krug when you had a true offensive defenseman on the point on that power play that was willing to shoot the puck, and maybe turn that power play even into a more dangerous unit than it is right now, Mick?
In theory, yeah. In practice, I don't like the idea. It's kind of late in the season, and I feel like if it did happen, 2 things concern me. One, Lowry would defer to the incumbent stars. He'd always want to be giving the puck back to Marchand or Pasta or whoever he feels like he should. He'd do too much of that deferral stuff, and you wouldn't have it in sync the way it would need to be the outcome that you're looking for there, you see the potential for. The other thing is I just feel like there's so much rotation and those guys are on the ice in interchangeable positions that Lowry's a guy that you need to be in a recovery spot. And if that's also on his mind, so I'm thinking of ways it could go wrong. But I also see that we might wind up seeing what you're talking about in the playoffs. But if we do, it'll be a bad reason. that they're desperate for something. A lot of times you don't see things that you've been aching for all year until the playoffs because they finally reached out, exhausted all their options, and they're in trouble.
Well, why not do it now then, and get some reps now and get looks at it now? If you make that determination that Lowry's playing so well that he's going to probably be sticking around, and you're just putting him in the best spot he can be. And like you mentioned the rotations, like the rotation was a bad thing last night because it ended up with Pasta as the lone man back up high on the point, and a block shot later, it turned into a shorthanded goal at the other end of the ice. Steve, your thoughts on Lowry, just where he fits on the power play and what they should do with him?
Yeah, I don't. Excuse me. I don't think McAvoy is the issue on that first power play unit. I think the issue is the four forwards seem to be so spread out, too often. Yeah, maybe McAvoy plays a part in that. I don't know.
I think McAvoy's reluctance to shoot chronically is definitely an issue and a problem. I think it just makes him a less than ideal point person on the power play.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't on the power play last night, but first period he was shooting the lights out.
Yeah.
So I think he's, his strength is taking the puck down low on the right side and looking for open guys in front of the net. And that's what he does very well. And usually when you see him lug the puck down low, something good usually happens.
Yep.
So I'd be reluctant to yank him off the power play. And you got to manage people too. He's your horse. He probably wants to be there. I'm not sure I'd do that right now.
I think that you hit the nail on the head with that. I think that's the biggest reason why it's probably not going to happen is because you have star players on this team that want to be on that unit, certainly can make plays on that unit and have the credentials to be on that unit. I just look at Lowry as just a pure offensive defenseman with like a different kind of skill set, a different kind of creativity, and just the smoothness. He can go lateral with passes back and forth. Like he looks like a classic, like high point power play defenseman kind of guy that you could put back there and he'll be back there for 10 years and just pile up points and the power play will be really efficient and, high scoring and good with him. He just seems like that kind of defenseman to me. But I think you're right. I think, we're talking about human beings. We're talking about team chemistry and like everything else. And I think that's a massive consideration, is putting a kid like that on the first power play unit. And maybe you put it like a McAvoy on the second. And is that going to be okay with everybody? I think that's definitely a consideration. Interesting stuff from Don Sweeney and Cam Neely over the last few days. Don Sweeney on Nesson, Cam Neely to The Athletic, but both like on the same vein. And you, Steve, Mick, we've all talked about this a lot. The need for physicality, the need for heavy players, the need for, a better, another defenseman to add to the group, especially a guy that can help them get stops in crunch time and third periods to keep them, from going to all these overtimes and blowing the leads. Here's what Don Sweeney had to say on Nesson. We've always put forth that we want to be a highly competitive team. There's the physical part of the game that we're lacking at times. Maybe we'd like to try and address that. We've tried to use our depth throughout the organization. A lot of guys have done a tremendous job in that regard, but we may have to look outside to find some. And Neely said another stiff defender would be good. You could always use help on offense. Obviously, I like the size of Brazeau. That adds an element to the bottom part of the lineup we haven't had for a while. Richard, I love his speed and tenacity. He's more physical than I anticipated him being, which is a good thing. That's an element where we could probably play a little more physical than we have. I'm not talking about put somebody in the third row, but just creating a little more anxiety. It really feels to me like they are lining up to get a couple of players, not exactly like last year, but similar to last year when they pulled off the trade with Washington and they got Hathaway and they got Orlov, two physical players, heavy players, playoff-style players. Obviously, it didn't work last year, but I think they're on the right track, and I like hearing these kind of things from them in terms of what they think they need to do to add to this year's group. Steve, do you think that they're on the right track with what they're saying here?
Absolutely. And, they signed Milan Lucic for a reason, right?
Right.
They needed that piece, and for obvious reasons, he's not available to them now. So yeah, they have to look at something like that. Maybe not a Lucic type. Maybe he's a guy on the back end, but somebody who brings a little fear factor to the proceedings. I mean, I would probably go defense route on that, just because that's what they need anyway. So yeah, they're bang on.
Nick Seeler is a guy that's popped up recently, Mick, defenseman in Philly. Definitely got plenty of penalty minutes, good sized Minnesota kid, left shot. Is that somebody you think could fit some kind of bill for the Boston Bruins if he was in play in trade talks?
I don't know what to say. When I've watched Philadelphia, a guy who plays with swagger might not be a good defender. So I want a guy who's, if it's going to be a defenseman, he's got to be able to defend. And, and, you know, in all the technical senses, he's got to be very reliable in that spot and be able to shut down. I feel like that's what they need back there, to play with McAvoy and with a mean edge would be great. I also think that the Bruins terribly lack an ability to wear down opponents and create that anxiety on the puck retrievals. They don't wear down defensemen. Theirs get worn down. To me, that's been the storyline of most of their playoff losses in this era. And until that's addressed effectively, and you always wind up doing more than you thought when you get to the playoffs and you go on a big, deep run. And so for me, yeah, let's do it. I'd like to see a second liner who can forecheck and scare defensemen and create those turnovers. And a defenseman on the left with a left shot that can play with McAvoy and add some snarl there and play at that level. Those would be the two top priorities for this hockey team.
Any forwards you have in mind, Mick, or somebody you've seen that you think would be that wear down, forecheck, disruptor kind of player that you think they should target, or somebody that you like?
No, that's been the hardest part for me is identifying, watching games, looking at teams that are sellers right now and saying, could you pluck this guy? Has this guy got the right contractual situation? Does he have the right stage of his development? Is he in the right spot in his career? And I'm having a hard time with that. I don't really know if that's a solvable thing at this deadline or anything that can be really effectively addressed at this deadline. I'm not terribly confident about that part of it right now. I feel certain about the need. I don't feel certain about the solution.
Yeah. I think they definitely, I mean, there's a lot of players that can fill that need too. You know, there's more than I guess we realize out there that could potentially be available. I guess the good news is if they're looking for heavy bruiser fear factor kind of players, it's not going to cost them an arm and a leg. And I think, you know, just looking at what the Flames got for Tanev, the fact that they couldn't get a first round pick for him, I think in some ways that bodes a little well for the trade market, the prices, all that stuff, Steve, as far as what the Bruins are going to have to pay. And they're probably going to be able to get what they want without, having the high-end draft pick assets or having to part with prospects they don't want to part with. These are doable moves that I think they're going to be able to make at the deadline.
Yeah, but they're going to have to move money out.
Yep.
Right. And you move out, there are people who say, oh, just get rid of Grzelcyk and Forbett and that'll take care of everything. I mean, that means you need to bring two defensemen back. You need defensemen in the playoffs.
Yep.
The only way to really clear up cap space, get something back in return that maybe you can flip for a player is if you move Allmark. And that's a gamble, but every trade is a gamble. So will they do that? How much would that mess with Swayman if they did that? Because we all know the symbiotic relationship and how they've rotated all season. That's something they're going to have to gauge. But I'd be shocked if they're not looking at it right now. And let me also say that. Half the league you can't trade them to trade Allmark to, and then there are how many teams left need the goalie and will pay for the goalie. There's like a couple of teams,
right. And it's going to be pennies on the dollar. You probably get more for them in the summertime if you try to trade them than you would right now. The goalie market's never great as far as trades go, anyway. But I mean, the trading of Grzelcyk like you say you're trading away a defenseman, but you'd be also trading for a defenseman if you were trading him away, right? So if you had to trade him for cap space to make a couple of other deals and bring somebody in, I would be in favor of that only because I think, Grzelcyk has not had the greatest season. Grzelcyk is somebody that's always been a bit of a liability in his own end in the playoffs. And either, he's gotten hurt a few times in the playoffs and also like gets attacked and exploited in his own zone in the playoffs. And if you're getting a bigger, stronger defender and sort of upgrading while, the money is a wash, or you're able to move his money to bring in a forward and a D, at the trade deadline, I think you have to do that. I just think there's too many moving parts in my mind for Ullmark to make the deal work. I think that's a high degree of difficulty for them moving Ullmark, getting something for him, making all these other moves, like doing a flurry of like 3 or 4 different things to try to make stuff like that happen.
Yeah, I'm not sure Grzelcyk's value is all that high for some of the reasons that you ticked off. Yep. He's on an expiring contract. Yep. It's not like some team an also-ran is going to pony up to get him.
No, you'd be trading him for the cap space. You'd be trading him for a draft pick for the cap space, make other moves. That's what you'd be doing. There's no question about it.
So you have to add value to that then.
What's that?
In order to get a team to take Grzelcyk's cap, you'd have.
No, I think he has value for.
You'd probably have to throw in a draft pick of your own.
I agree.
Maybe. If you think his value is that low that you would have to like throw it, somebody's looking at him as a salary cap weight, an albatross thrown around somebody's
just because of the circumstances.
Yeah.
If a team's looking at the Boston Bruins and saying, okay, they've considered this guy a non-solution and need to move him out to upgrade, then that means that why would any other contender be looking at him? And what expiring contract has any value if it's not to a contender? And otherwise, you've got to compensate further and make them, and then you're dealing cap space instead of the player if it's not going to a contender, in which case you're doing what Steve said and sending a draft pick or a prospect.
Potentially. I mean, I still think there's value in Grzelcyk for a team that needs a puck-moving defenseman. Yes, he's had a down year, but he's got a track record of being top 4 defenseman in the league and being able to move the puck. But I think the points you're making are well thought out.
It's the timing and the optics. I agree with you on Grzelcyk. It's the timing and the optics.
Yeah.
But I agree with Steve that I think that the Ullmark thing is going to be the only ticket that they would have in order to do a kind of impactful upgrade that they could make to a top 4 position on defense. Yeah, you got to rob Peter to pay Paul. And if you're going to see if Swayman can handle it next year anyway without Ullmark, because Swayman ain't going to get his career contract, and you're going to keep Allmark, right? Do we agree on that?
Correct.
Yeah,
right. Correct.
So I think Allmark's gone this summertime, regardless of what happens.
Okay, so then, what? To me, if you know that you're not, if you know, and I hope they know that you're not contending for the Stanley Cup as is, and this is your only ticket. And I agree with Steve. This is your ticket to a significant upgrade in either the forward position or the defense position. Then, to me, it's like, what are you waiting for? Well, I don't understand. To me, it's like, this guy's not going to play for you next year. I mean, you're going to make a move. Why you forfeit your opportunity this year from the position you're in the standings to improve your team and take a run at this thing?
I think it also takes away the headache of a potential goalie controversy brewing in the playoffs if you try to go with this goalie rotation every other game, thing theory that they've talked about like for most of the season, which I just think in practicality is not going to work. Especially if like you give Swayman a start in game 1 and he plays great. Are you really going to go away from him in game 2 and go with a strict goalie rotation because you tied yourself to that before the postseason started and said, we need to try this? I don't think so. I don't think any coach is going to do that.
Yeah. I mean, you can go through all sorts of permutations. Like what happens if goalie 1 craps the bed in game 1, you'd make the switch. 2 is lights out in game 2. You go back to goalie 1 in game 3.
Right.
It's just
No hockey coach is going to do that.
Yeah.
He's
No,
not
they
going to
won't.
let the pocket protector brigade tell him that he's going to go back to that guy in game 3 because we got to stick to that strict goalie rotation that we said we were going to do to, try to prove to the rest of the NHL that it's doable and that it's the new wave of playoff goalie rotations. No way.
Now, we know how the story ends. So as far as I'm concerned, the Bruins have an opportunity here with DeBrusque, with Allmark, to make moves to trend. And even if they don't wind up setting you up and you lose a year of Allmark's, being tethered to him for a guy who can walk, I think it's worth it. They're at a position here. They've had a good season, way better than I thought could have happened. Just like last year, way better than I thought could have happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now that they're there, I'm like, you know what? Let's stop worrying about the room and let's stop worrying about all these other things because we've seen this team's fatal flaws. They're right in front of us. They're staring us in the face. Let's do this. And if you can get Hannafin on this team, I would give up next year's Allmark contract to get Hannafin on this team, not knowing that I could have him beyond this year. I would do it.
I don't know about that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. And I don't know. I don't know if Calgary is on his no trade list. It usually is on everybody's no trade list.
I was going to say
those 7 Canadian teams.
Buffalo, Calgary, and Edmonton are on the no trade list. I would say those are all pretty good bets.
The 3-team
all 3 of those teams would be on there. All right. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. Great talk, as always, on the Boston Bruins. I want to thank our sponsors, PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other star players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection and watch the winnings roll in. So download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the PrizePicks app today. Totally easy to use, and then punch in the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Steve, Mick, thank you very much. Appreciate it, guys.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Thanks,
and
Mick.
Everybody else out there, thanks for listening. We'll see you at the rink.